Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the film Road Diary, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band with director and producer Thom Zimny. And one of the first things I wanted to start by talking about was I've heard you say that you've really wanted to do something creatively that would really unpack a lot of the process and the behind the scenes of what goes into these shows with Bruce, because you've had such a long time collaboration with him, obviously. And I was interested in how this project kind of finally got that idea that had been culminating off the ground for you and what initially felt important to try and capture in it.
I think the project came together with Road Diary, together in a typical Bruce way, which is an organic process, which is I'm stepping into a space, whether it's a studio or a rehearsal space, and I'm watching. From the very beginning, it's taking note as a filmmaker, what's on my story in front of me? What are the details that are unfolding? And I realized that I've always seen Bruce as a storyteller. So with Road Diary, it was no different that he was piecing together with these rehearsals and the set list every day a story. He was telling a story for the show, and suddenly I realized that could be the arc of my movie. That we go in for those details, what songs he's picking, what those songs mean, what themes are there, and how do they reflect the band's journey and Bruce's journey as an artist. So it was it wasn't something that was planned. It was one of those things of observing small details of the creative process and thinking that'd be so great to share. You know, and I think a part of it comes from as a filmmaker being interested in artists and their process from a long time ago, and getting past just the big details of where and how they tour or how big the tour might be, and getting into those smaller my details that demonstrate their craft, but also their desire to tell a story, whether it's Bruce or Johnny Cash or Elvis, or whoever I'm working on.
I love that. And you were bringing up that idea of the stories really create this communication, and we see that discussion of the way that the set list tells a very specific story to the audience. And I was interested in how that idea of the songs that they chose for this tour and the set list telling this very specific journey, how that in turn shaped the journey of the conversation that you were in tandem creating in this film.
I think it goes hand in hand, the the influence of Bruce's setting up of a narrative arc in the set list. What I'm seeing is, as a filmmaker, I'm seeing that he's dealing with all these themes of his past work and contemporary writing, which are all based in this area of examining life in the moment, your history from the past, and the power of time and aging. So, of course, seeing all those songs and seeing him build this set list, my questions reflected those themes. My questions of of the band or people associated with the band, like John Landau and his manager for 50 years. All, I'm taking my cues from Bruce's songs, and the film's tempo and emotional arc mirrored what I saw he was doing in the live arena. So I literally followed and chased the tempo of how the show would flow. There's moments of joy, moments of sadness. And Bruce to me has been an amazing collaborator, and John too, in that space that they give me access. And in that access, I can watch from a distance and learn and then come back to them later and ask questions. And that's a trust that they've given me in the past 25 years that's helped me to tell this kind of story that Road Diary became.
And there's also that idea of what you were talking about there of memories and reflections, and how does it influence the way that we're seeing certain things in the present, and so in tandem with that, you've got band members, you've got Bruce reflecting on that, but then you've also kind of got these little tangential moments of archival footage. And how did you want to visually try to evoke that for the audience so that they kind of understand the way that it shapes these songs in very specific ways in the present for everybody?
I think um, I think I used archival footage in a way to be a messenger of understanding the E Street history. when you cut to a band member in 1975, and then you cut to them in the moment, there's this magical thing that happens where you get a sense of their whole journey just with that simple edit. The power of editing really takes you into a dream space. And I played with that so that I would go back and forth from contemporary footage with them on tour to the place of showing those early days to give you a feeling of where when they started, small clubs. So I'm quite aware of the tool of editing in the storytelling and also how it brings you into what could describe as a dream space. It's sort of timeless. You're in a story, and then all of a sudden, the music and the visuals are of a Bruce Springsteen that you've never seen before. 1973 Bruce Springsteen, younger with a beard, different type of performance. The band looks very different. And in the editing, I'm able to take you through the years. That emotional space is really important in setting up the conversation that the film is having with the Uber fan, with the casual fan, and also furthering the theme of time and age. Um, the themes that I held on to from Bruce's writing was this examination of those themes. So, the voiceover that he's giving me lends me the opportunity to dip into old images and stills and music cues, but it's really that the power of his writing alongside the editing that takes you to that what I call dream space, where you're back in time. And the film plays with that. It plays with that as a tempo. It plays with that in the details of storytelling, and I know when we're in the present moment, things are unfolding, they're figuring out the tour, and I know when to drop off into the past, and the past is timeless. I want these films to reflect E Street history, but I also feel really strong that I always try to capture Bruce in the moment as an artist because he's constantly creating and he's constantly coming up with new music.
And you just mentioned the voiceover that he's written and recorded for this as well. And did you almost find that as you went on that that voiceover kind of became the conductor of the piece in telling you what the film needed at any given moment?
It's a collaboration that his voiceover um, dictates the tonal qualities of the choices of film, what archive. It's one of the most intimidating things and the most exciting thing to get a text from Bruce that's a voiceover. Then it arrives in an email where he's recorded it. And now you have nothing but a black slate that's what's the visual to put over this idea? What's the visual? What's the music to put underneath? What what brings it to another level? And it's sometimes really, really hard. There'll be one section of the voiceover where everything falls flat. Every image I put on there, it feels too literal. It's taking you out. These are the things that I love and obsess over. And his voiceovers launch me not only into a space of what the story can be and the arc of it, but they also launch you into that dream space again because you can pick a million different things from the vault, or you can pick a contemporary moment. How does it play against the word, the spoken word? And there's many times I will say to him, "There's an idea that I think we need here," but I don't give him any writing examples. I give him some visuals, and I will send him visuals that he will write something and send it back to me, and then I rebuild it all over again because now it's at a whole other level. So there is a communication back and forth where I'm sending him sequences and all this. I'm having also the dialogue with John Landau, who's been with me for in the space of collaboration on these films for 25 years. So there's a whole conversation that begins the moment I start shooting the first frame.
It's wonderful. And I also feel like in watching the film that, I think there's something that you're able to really specifically bring the audience into, which is learning and understanding the element of silent communication because, Bruce and the band have such a history together. And so there's so many ways that they're communicating in the rehearsal process. as they're figuring out the shows and when they're on stage. And as you step into the film, you start to see those little nods and notes. And so, was it quite challenging to find how to communicate that to an audience at first, or did you find it a little bit more naturally?
No, it's a great question. It's very challenging to witness something that's a very small detail and then want to take it into the area of film and say, wait, stop, look at this differently. This is how are we going to show Bruce the band leader? How are we going to show this idea that with his physical body, he is telling the band how to play the music, and the band can secretly read it. But that history of being that band leader comes from many years of studying other artists like James Brown. Um, the idea at first is very small. It's the band is reading Bruce, but you have to take it and step aside and go, all right, where's that happening? Let me look at my footage. Let me look at my dailies. Oh, there's a moment where Bruce, in that gesture, is telling him to slow the tempo down, is telling the keyboard to accent something. And you start to uncover the messaging and the secret language of E Street, the secret language of a band leader and a band who have been together for so long. It's a brotherhood that they don't need to use words. They don't need to say slow down. They could just read Bruce's gestures. That to me is like unpacking the creative process, but also exciting to share with an audience because I'm constantly switching gears as an editor and director where I'm the fan going, oh, that's so cool. That's great. And then also looking at it from the point of view of being an editor and saying, this is a story point, we got it, we move on to the next idea. So there's a conversation I'm having internally with myself at all times um, when I'm exploring these details. And sometimes it's the smaller details that really unpack the bigger story.
No, that's it's great. And I also feel like there's this element of the way that each of the members of the band really thrive in different ways and have completely different creative processes. They have the process as the group, but you kind of break it down individually and you see how some of them talk about when they've done shows without specific set lists, and some of them love it, and some of them need a little bit more of that structure. And, well, here are the parameters and the guidelines, and here's where you can go and play. And so, how did you want to make sure that it wasn't just, this is Bruce's process, but this is the entire band's process, and all of them look a little bit different?
I really wanted to share the many voices of E Street. Share the space. It's a choir of voices um, overlapping, and the beauty of E Street is that the guys know each other so well that they have a musicality to their voices where they're finishing each other's stories. So you'll have Max Weinberg, who knows all the details, can tell you the date, can tell you the hour, can tell you everything that happened during the day. And then there's Steven, who just has a great passion to get to the musical details and make sure every detail of it is correct. And then there's the beauty of Gary, who is an amazing player and comes out with a great dry sense of humor that steps back and observes everything. And then there's the beauty of Roy, who's playing is unbelievable on this tour and just all the years of the studio work. He comes in with observations, memories, and great stories of being in the van with Clarence and cooking. So I wanted to use all these different voices and also some band members that were some musicians that were playing with the band members for the first time, so that the new voices came in too, saying this is a great experience. The European crowds are so it's a choir of voices, and then there's Bruce who comes in voiceover, and he's whispering to you across from a tavern. Well, this is what I think. And this is what I've gone through. And this is what I worry about. This is what I love. Like he's 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 the voice of a conversation of both friendship and intimacy in that way of like another point of view. And he's not intercut with the rest of the film. He just comes in on his own. So that was deliberate and I thought about it a lot. And I realized in just the very first beginning days of editing this that the E Street Band could carry this movie so beautifully because they gave me so much in the interviews. They gave me so much trust. and they gave me so much time and memories.
It also feels like a lot of what we get from the element of the band is seeing those moments where, yes, this is what we've rehearsed, this is what we go on stage, and this is what we do every night, but also getting to witness those moments of discovery and, what happens when Bruce just holds the song a little bit longer? What happens when he pulls someone to the foreground, even if that's not how they did it the night before? And so, how did you make sure that you were kind of highlighting those moments for the audience in the film?
Well, to figure out Bruce's process and show it in a documentary, you have to study the footage. There's not one throwaway moment. There's not. You have to look at it. What happened right there? Oh, in the documentary, there's a great moment where John Landau and Bruce are talking. He says, "I don't want to rehearse anymore today," and you see John's surprise. Now, that's a great story point. It shows Bruce, the band leader, not wanting to over rehearse the band. And it also shows the idea of John's collaboration with him, where he's questioning, going, "Are you sure?" And then you have Steven's point of view. That very small moment of verite documentary footage could have been overlooked. But I look at this stuff very closely, whether it's being on stage or the footage captured in the moment, and ask myself, well, how does this play into the story? Bruce, one night, sang a section of Night Shift differently. I noticed it and went back and asked questions. What happened? Where did that? So it's really examining the details again and again, and in a way, the movie's talking to you that way. That's what came to me as an editor, which is you study your dailies. You study because the movie's saying this is a moment. Take notice. Find out more about this. And I came into directing as an editor, so I would spend a lot of time with editors and directors watching their process. And one of the big things was watching how they studied the footage and pulled out story points and and sometimes search through things for deeper meaning. And that was a great training ground for me, and it's what I apply to all the films, but especially Bruce, because nothing's small.
And also with exactly what you're describing there about that examination of the footage and kind of examination of the process, I was interested in how that shaped what we see of the rehearsals, because that's a side that audiences don't usually get a window into. And I imagine that you could have made an entire film that was just that part of it. And so how did you find the little threads of what's really going to tell a story within this process and within these moments?
I think in figuring out the narrative arc of what the rehearsals would be, I tried to constantly step in and out of the present moment, showing the conflict. They're playing slow. What does that mean? The result of them, like, how do they get out of this problem, this funk? And by going to the past. So there's a dance that's going on in the rehearsals that is going in and out of time, and showing the resolve of Bruce is writing the set list a particular way. What has he done in the past? I go to the past to show that it's an opposite. So I use the rehearsals as an arc, not only to drive story forward to explain E Street history, but also to reflect what the show was doing, which was one foot in the past, one foot in the moment, and also balance it in a way that it became nonlinear in your mind, that you weren't just sitting there for a long time going through every rehearsal day and then the film ends with them going up on stage and playing a song. Emotionally, that's not enough for me, and I knew that the story was bigger than that. So there's a setup in the beginning of this is the rehearsal, but I also was able to, in the middle of the film, go back to the rehearsal to kind of shadow and remind you of the process, what it took to be this band now live on stage. So it was a tricky little editorial device because I was going back and forth and breaking timelines, but it's not confusing because it's really not based on details of days. It's based on ideas. And when it's based on ideas, then you can carry through an idea of rehearsal and what it means throughout the movie. But
It's
it takes some time.
And I mean, also as the film progresses and we're kind of going through some of the different numbers on stage, you kind of give us these snippets of performances, but then you find these moments where we spend a little bit more time with the musical number. And, so by the time we get to Last Man Standing, it's not only that we're getting more of the musical number, it's also that the camera's more intimate and it's kind of bringing us into the performance in a way that transcends what you get if you're in the crowd because you don't get to be that close in that moment. And so how did you want to really create those shifts and changes and to have, especially for numbers like that towards the end, to feel very different?
Well, I've taken a lot of cues from my relationship with John and Bruce over the years on how they structure albums, the emotional arc and ride of a show or an album. There's a certain tempo to it. And knowing with Road Diary, I couldn't show full songs all the time, but you needed the emotional connection at times to really let a song play out, to just step away from the movie and feel the power of pure rock and roll and E Street. And then there's other moments, and these are the hardest moments, which is the montages of songs. Like you have a song like Born in the USA, where do you come in to represent it? Well, the theme of the film was this communication he was having with the audience. The chorus of the crowd spoke to me. The duration of the Born in the USA section in the Road Diary documentary, I think between John, myself, and Bruce, we maybe did 38 versions of it. One was 13 seconds, one was 16 seconds, one had an intro and then the end of the song. Everything is explored. None of the musical moments or details of the film are just kind of put together randomly. The montages had to feel like you weren't cheated. You felt the song, you went to the next song, and it's also building on ideas that the audience is participating, that they've achieved this height at the end of the show. It was really, that was the hardest thing, is finding what is the emotional blast to have with three songs that doesn't feel like what happened. I'm just what happened to the movie. We didn't, we just went into montage mode. It was something that took a lot of finessing. In classic Bruce style, it's something that we poured over again and again to the very end. And like one more beat on this song or one more, and that's the part that I love is that dedication to um, finding the story and moving the needle at times until it's just right at that perfect place emotionally, and you say, okay, that represents the end of the concert. That felt like the energy. That's it. And being open to it's almost like the dialogue that the band has, which is you prepare to be able to be spontaneous in the moment. You prepare and research and try to be ready in the moment, but you have to be completely open for Bruce to grab a sign from the crowd. It's no different in the filmmaking process. I totally relate to that process.
There's also so much in terms of the communication that we get from Bruce's voiceover, from the interviews with the band about the community and the connection with the audience. And you see how central that is to every single thing that goes into these shows for all of them. And the film, in turn, becomes part of that in kind of celebrating it and capturing it. And sometimes it's these little snippet interviews with people about their history as a fan and the shows that they've been to or the relationships that they have with other people. And sometimes it's just the way that you're filming people in the crowd and kind of what we're seeing in the moment. And I wanted to ask about whether that was something that you went into the making of this film having a really strong idea from in seeing over the years the importance of that to Bruce and his music and his tours, or if you kind of found that along the way from his voice notes and narration.
I think for a long time I wanted to do a thing. I want to make a film that captures. It's something that I can't put into words, but I hope the film conveys this, which is there is a moment you're standing next to a stranger and you see in their eyes a deep connection of the music, and you get a sense that in their story something has changed in this moment. The music is hitting them. They have a reflection of their own life. They're going to take this moment home, and the next day is going to feel different. That's what I was chasing when I filmed The Fans, was that recognition of the power of Bruce's lyrics, music in people's lives. I wanted to see in their eyes that connection. And it's a very abstract thing. And I shot thousands of hours of footage. And you would be watching in the edit room, someone's enjoying the show, they're talking to their partner, they're looking up at the stage, it comes to a verse, and you see them lock on. And for those 13 seconds, they're in that space. And that's what I would use. So I knew I wanted to capture that invisible thing, this bond, this conversation that happens nightly. And I knew that to do it, I would have to slow down the moment to examine it. And also embrace the beauty and the power of faces taking in the music. I wasn't interested in fans that um, had dedicated their life to him in some kind of iconic way. I was interested in people who were carrying the music with them on a daily basis as part of their being, as part of their daily understanding of life, and and had grown up with his music or have had parents connected to it. I wanted a sense of history. I didn't want the shocking fan who has a whole house layered with Bruce. I wanted the person who's deeply involved in the world, but also carrying this messenger of music. The message at times is one of hope, one of love, one of pure rock and roll, like all the things that the fans talked about. And I looked for voices that conveyed the joy um, of the experience, the joy of the music, and their need to participate in this conversation.
I love that. And obviously, again, just going back to the history that you have and the number of projects that you've worked on with Bruce. I know it's been over a dozen long form, documentaries, pieces, diaries, and that's not even counting music videos and shorter form and other pieces. And so obviously you came into making this with an understanding of a lot of elements of his process, but through that study and that examination, I was actually really interested in some of the elements that you saw or kind of uncovered for yourself in your understanding of his craft and his approach to the process.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to make sure I understand. You're saying like the things that I walked away with his process over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
over the years, or with Road
I think
Diary?
in the process of making this film, because
Oh,
obviously you
with
came with such an understanding already.
Sure, sure. In the process of Road Diary and like the surprising things that Bruce kind of revealed in the filmmaking process, I think the power of I come to this as an editor, and and the power of his editorial choices of taking a song that he wrote a few years ago and putting next to another song, and how those emotions suddenly change for both tracks. Um, there's a powerful thing in the placement of the set list, and to me that was something that was new to really look at. It's editing at the ultimate form because it's creating an emotional arc that's very hard to put into words. Song like Backstreets he wrote in 1975. I've heard it many, many times, but he places it near another song that he recently wrote about the loss of a friend. It becomes something completely different. That's the magic of Bruce, and it's the power of those words. So that was just one of the many things that he taught me, which was the power of the emotional placement of these songs and how it all matters in a deep, deep way that adds up to the whole night. The other thing is just looking at how he brings many emotional feelings in a single event, which is the concert itself went through happiness, sadness, intensity, laughter. That was a very powerful thing to look at. And also, I tried to reflect it in the film. So it's not one tone. I do take a lot of my cues from John and Bruce, and I think it's been a powerful space to develop my creativity in film. But also, it's that thing of, like everyone else, it creeps into your life, and you get a chance to look at your life in a different way. And that's the power of rock and roll for me.
Yeah, I love that answer. Well, thank you so much for talking all about the
Thank
film.
you.
It's wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Great chat.